In the summer of 1518, a terrifying and strange phenomenon took the streets of Strasbourg, which is now a bustling city in modern-day France. Hundreds of people started dancing uncontrollably, sweating profusely, and even collapsing from exhaustion. The bizarre epidemic quickly spread throughout the streets, with more and more people joining the frenzied dance every day. What could have caused so many people to dance themselves long into exhaustion? Was it mass hysteria, divine punishment, a curse? In this video, we'll explore the Dancing Plague 1518 in full. We'll go into what people of that time period thought could have caused the Dancing Plague, as well as what scientists and historians believe could have caused the affliction today. Strasbourg was a very prosperous city in the 16th century and a hub for trade and commerce, with around 20,000 people living in it. Situated on the Rhine River, it was an important centre for the textile industry, producing fine linens and silk that were highly sought after by wealthy merchants from all around Europe. The city was also known for its religious tolerance and cultural diversity, with a healthy mix of both Catholic and Protestant communities, as well as a thriving Jewish quarter. However, the city was not immune to the social and political upheaval sweeping across Europe during this time period. The Reformation had brought a split in the Christian Church, with the Protestant ideals challenging the authority of the Catholic Church. Despite the tension, the city was also deeply affected by the wars and territorial disputes of the European powers surrounding them, with Strasbourg sadly caught in the middle. The Dancing Plague of 1518 started in July of that year, when a young lady named Fruit Troffier stepped onto the street and started erratically dancing. She danced for hours on end without taking any breaks until she eventually collapsed from exhaustion, only to get back up again and continue her frenzied movements. She continued this way for days on end, and within a week, 30 more people joined the world's most contagious conga line. They kept going long past the point of injury, just begging for the affliction to stop. City authorities were alarmed by the ever-increasing number of dancers, and civic and religious leaders theorized that more dancing was the solution. Which I find hilarious, like, hey doc, people won't stop dancing. Have you considered more dancing? Could solve that problem. How do we stop the dancers? Oh, we just dance them all. So they arranged for guild halls where dancers to gather in, as well as hired musicians and dancers to keep the dancers dancing. As I'm sure you can guess, this only exacerbated the contagion and eventually had up to 400 people dancing at one time. They danced in the streets, in the public squares, and even the churches for hours on end, without any aim or purpose or any sign of them slowing down. Some sources claim the dancers danced until they died of exhaustion, while others collapsed because of strokes or heart attacks. The epidemic continued to spread until more and more people joined the frenzied dance, until it eventually peaked in August of that year. In early September, the mania finally started to decrease until it eventually stopped, with the only thing remaining being the still lasting mystery. The 1518 event was the most thoroughly documented and probably the last of such outbreaks in Europe, mainly between the 10th and 16th century. Otherwise best known of these events actually happened in 1374 and also happened on the Rhine River. At this time, the disease was called St. John's Dance. According to the Smithsonian, the Dancing Plague of 1374 spread up and down the Rhine River and affected many towns between Belgium and the Netherlands, including Liège, Tongres, and Ergot. Sorry for my pronunciation, I try my best, it's just I don't speak French personally. Controversy exists on whether people ultimately danced to their deaths. Some sources claim that when the plague was at its peak, it killed around 15 people per day. But the writings from Strasbourg at that time period do not mention how many people died or even if there were any fatalities. The fact there are no contemporary sources about the Dancing Plague fatalities states that there probably wasn't any deaths, or if so, the deaths weren't related to the Dancing Plague entirely, as Strasbourg City Council normally was actually pretty good at listing off key information about the plague. The primary source of the claim is historian John Waller, who has written several journals and articles as well as a book, and the sources cited by John Waller that mention the deaths in the Dancing Plague 1518 were all taken long after the actual event happened, some even hundreds of years later. Symptoms of the Dancing Plague of 1518 were often varied and bizarre. As I said earlier, the dancers were in a trance-like state, which means they couldn't communicate with others or respond to their surroundings. Some more severe symptoms that have been claimed include heart attacks, strokes, and exhaustion, which are possible to die from, as I'm sure you're aware. The fact so many people were affected by the epidemic suggests that it wasn't a simple case of mass hysteria, if it was mass hysteria at all. The fact that so many people were affected means it probably wasn't a simple case of mass hysteria or suggestion if it was one of those two things, but instead a much more complex and multifaceted phenomenon. The dancing plague 1518 has been the cause of much speculation and debate among scientists and historians, with no clear consensus on what caused the epidemic. There have been a few theories that have come up that I find kind of interesting, and I'll share them with you now. The most widely accepted theory is that of American medical historian John Waller, who I mentioned earlier in this video. John Waller has stated his reasons for believing the dancing plague 1518 is an event of mass psychogenic disorder in multiple papers, a phenomenon in which people experience a shared delusion or irrational behavior. This theory suggests that dancers were caught in a contagious frenzy sprouted from fear, anxiety, and social pressures. The fact the epidemic spread quickly and affected so many people really supports this theory. Such outbreaks occur under situations of extreme stress and generally take shape based on local fears. Waller cited a series of famines as well as a couple of diseases such as syphilis and smallpox that were the overwhelming stresses when it affected the people of Strasbourg. Another unique theory is that the dancing plague was actually a form of protest or rebellion by the fact that the epidemic did occur at a time of great political and religious upheaval, where tensions were high, and it is also supported by the fact that most of the dancers were from lower classes. My final theory is the dancers suffered from ergot poisoning from eating contaminated rye bread. Ergot is a fungus that grows in wheat, rye, and other grains that can cause hallucinations, convulsions, and profuse sweating, as well as a few other symptoms associated with the dancing plague. This theory is supported by the fact there was a crop failure in the region that year. This may have led to a food shortage, which could cause a reliance on contaminated bread for those who could not afford the exorbitant prices for wheat from other areas. This would also explain the fact that most of the people that were affected by the dancing plague were from poorer classes, like I stated earlier. Funnily enough, the dancing plague 1518 is not the only case of mass hysteria in history, if it is a case of mass hysteria at all. You could put it in the ergot, but if it was a case of mass hysteria, it's not the only one in history. There have been many other unexplained epidemics throughout our time, such as the Salem witch trials of 1692 and the Tanganyikan laughter epidemic of 1962. Now, for a fun fact, Tanganyika is now Tanzania, and Tanganyika was only around from 1961 to 1964, and in those short 3 years they had their own mass hysteria epidemic, which I think is quite cool because it's only been around for 3 years and it still had its own epidemic, and I think that's kind of funny. No, not funny, I mean, it was a disease, but you know what I mean, like they only had 3 years and the whole chunk of that was, you know, weird epidemic, you know. Yeah, you can just cut that part out if you'd like. These events show that mass hysteria is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that is affected by various factors such as social norms, cultural beliefs, and psychological states. It also indicates that mass hysteria is not just a relic of the past, but is also still relevant and important today, especially when we face new challenges in our rapidly evolving world. The dancing plague 1518 is a disturbing and fascinating point in human history. It's a reminder of the power of social and cultural influences that shape our behaviours and beliefs. It's testament to the complexity of the human mind, as well as the importance of scientific inquiry and critical thinking. While we may never fully understand the plague's origins, it still remains a powerful reminder on human life's fragility, and the importance of compassion and empathy in dealing with tragedy. As we continue to grapple with the challenges of the modern world, it is worth remembering the lessons of the dancing plague, and how community shapes the lives we lead and the world around us. If you'd like to know more about the dancing plague, I put all the information that I used to create this video down in the description. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.